Steph, can you explain what the proposal is?
A 4-day working week, how good would that be? Well, the Australian Council of Trade Unions is suggesting that it should be offered to more people across Australia because this is something that's been talked about for some time, and in fact there are some businesses in Australia that do already offer it. But today, the peak union body, the ACTU, is saying that it should be offered to more workers across a number of different businesses. The reason they've brought this idea up is because next week the federal government is hosting what it calls the Economic Reform Roundtable. In simple words, it's about the government getting a stack of people to Canberra to talk about ways to boost Australia's productivity. So here in Canberra next week, we'll see unions, business groups, experts in different fields such as tech, science, university groups as well, and they're all being asked to put their ideas forward. So the ACTU is saying a 4-day working week is something that should be considered. It's pointed to research here in Australia and overseas saying that if introduced properly, a 4-day working week can actually boost productivity. It can keep retention rates of workers up because people essentially are happier because they're working less days. So as I mentioned, the ACTU is very much pushing for this, but we have also heard from business groups today who are a little bit more sceptical of the idea.
This is a way that everybody can benefit. It's a way of sharing the benefits fairly, and we think that's a really good proposal to take forward.
From a business point of view, we think that they want to have their cake and eat it too. I mean, clearly, you've got to have the productivity first. We want to see the ACTU coming to the table next week with substantive ideas, with positive suggestions.
Steph, what has the government had to say on this?
So there are a lot of ideas being thrown around Meredith already ahead of these talks next week. So the government's saying, look, nothing's off the table per se. They're open to the discussion. That said, the way that senior ministers have been talking today, it doesn't sound like, the government's going to suddenly require or ask businesses or the public sector make this, something that does occur. What has been said, though, is senior ministers have pointed to the fact that a number of people in different businesses already actually do have the capacity, at the very least, to ask their employer for more flexible work options.
When it comes to flexibility in the workplace, our legislative changes that we made last year actually allow for the request of employees to make flexible working arrangements and request to work flexibly. That includes compressed hours in 4 days. I know that a number of organisations have entered into enterprise bargaining where they've looked at 4 days. So we want to make sure that the industrial relations framework allows employers and employees to work on flexible arrangements as long as people don't go backwards in their pay.
So what else can we expect to be discussed next week?
So as I mentioned, all ideas are being put on the table. It's just a question of what exactly then the government takes on board. So for example, some have suggested that the family home should be taxed, but that has been ruled out by the Federal Treasurer. Others have suggested cutting the company tax rate or making changes to the GST. Another one that does seem like it will be discussed at length is this potential of a new road user charge, because at the moment, as a motorist, you pay a fuel excise when you fill up at the petrol pump. However, the amount of money the government is collecting from that is starting to reduce as more people buy electric cars and cars become more efficient. So the Treasurer has noted that he's spoken with his counterparts, his state counterparts about this, and that's something that potentially will still be, there's a lot of details to be worked out, but is still potentially on the table.
It's hard to preempt the suggestions that people might make. There might be sufficient appetite and sufficient common ground in areas that aren't especially controversial to make some progress on tax reform. But I give you the same answer I gave a moment ago. The government's priorities on tax are cutting income taxes for 14 million Australians, not once, not twice, but 3 times by the time we're finished.
So this Economic Reform Roundtable, it's happening over 3 days next week, Meredith, here in Canberra.
Okay, thanks for the update, Steph.